Welcome back. We're looking at a huge submission today, a series of scripts on the 3.5 million Epstein files, focusing specifically on Gates, Musk, Lutnik, and Trump. So let's get straight to it. The material creates this visceral shock right away, but it risks its own credibility by blending verified documents with unofficial anonymous tips.
I saw that tension immediately. You've got the Bill Gates STD email, which, looks like a direct draft by Epstein himself.
Right.
And it's sitting right next to these NTTO files. And those are they're wild.
The national threat operations stuff?
Yeah. We're talking anonymous third-hand claims about, scimitars and eating babies. But I guess my question is, those files are in the document dump.
They are.
So why shouldn't the writer lean into the most sensational material? Isn't that the hook?
It hooks them, sure, but it also gives them a really easy way to dismiss the entire thing. That's the weakness. When you put eating babies right next to a wire transfer, the wire transfer starts to sound like fiction too. So the suggestion here is to create a very strict tier system for evidence inside the narrative.
Okay.
You have to explicitly tell the listener what kind of source they're hearing about.
So it's less of a document dump and more of a curated sorting.
Exactly. A sorting.
How does that actually look in the script? Because right now it does feel like every single page of the 3.5 million is treated as equal proof.
And that's fatal for this kind of investigation. So, for example, take the Gates email. When the script talks about Epstein asking for antibiotics for Melinda and then threatening to reveal the affair, you have to label that. You call it documentary evidence of blackmail intent. That's a draft found in Epstein's own files. It's a primary source, high evidentiary value.
Okay, but you can't ignore the NTOC files. The story about the scimitar amputation or the chicken photo, that's the stuff that goes viral. If you cut it, are you sanitizing the horror?
You don't cut it, you frame it.
Frame it how?
You contrast the verified emails with the raw tips. Look at how the script already handles the Donald Trump section. It actually acknowledges that FBI tips can be anonymous, they can be politically motivated.
Right.
You apply that same standard, that same nuance to the satanic claim. You say, here is a confirmed email draft from Epstein to Gates, and then you pivot. And now here is a raw, unverified tip submitted to the FBI about ritual.
I see.
By separating them, you protect the integrity of the verified stuff.
That's a huge distinction. It stops the skepticism you need for the scimitar story from bleeding over into the Gates email.
Yes.
It changes the whole texture from a conspiracy theory to like a forensic analysis of the file. It's telling the listener, I know this part sounds crazy. That's why I'm flagging it. But this part over here, this is a bank transfer.
Precisely. You want the audience to trust your judgment as the narrator. If you treat everything as fact, they end up trusting nothing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It builds authority. Now, moving on to the characters, Musk, Lutnik. The script calls them liars a lot.
It does.
But for me, the impact felt kind of soft.
And that brings us right to our second point. The most compelling moments in this entire submission are when a public denial is put directly, and I mean direct, against a private contradiction.
Yes.
The script tries to do it, but it doesn't always stick the landing.
This was actually a frustration for me reading the draft. You get these whole sections that just feel like a roll call. Jay-Z is in the files. Al Gore is in the files.
It's very passive.
It's just a list. It's not an indictment of character. It lacks that punch. It's almost encyclopedic.
It is too encyclopedic. The listener is left thinking, okay, so they knew him, so what?
Right.
The suggestion here is to restructure the parts on Elon Musk and Howard Lutnik to follow a really strict public statement versus private reality format. You have to set them up just to knock them down.
Okay, let's workshop that from us. Right now, the script says he denied it, and then it kind of jumps around the timeline. It feels messy.
We can make that so much sharper. Just tighten. Start with his specific quote. Epstein tried to get me to go to his island. I refused.
And the tweet calling it all false.
Yes. Put that tweet in there. Let it just hang in the air for a beat. Let the audience hear his side. And then you immediately drop the hammer with the 2012 email tech.
The one that says,
I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's. A peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for.
oh, that hits hard. You aren't just saying he lied.
No.
You're showing the listener the gap between the mask and the face. It makes them feel like they're the ones who caught him.
It's active participation. And you do the exact same thing for Howard Lutnik. The script mentions he's a neighbor and that they had dinner, but the irony is just completely lost because the timeline is all jumbled.
Right. Lutnik does that whole moral high ground interview. He says he met Epstein once in 2005, saw a massage table, found him gross, and ran out of there.
He paints this whole picture of righteous indignation.
He does.
So, present that story in full. Let him have his moment on the high ground. Quote the interview where he says he grabbed his wife and walked out. And then immediately after, you introduce the 2012 email.
Hi, Jeff. Planning to head over.
Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good?
It just exposes the hypocrisy so much more effectively than saying they were friends. It proves the disgust was just a performance. It really changes the segment from Lutnik is in the files to Lutnik built a specific lie that the files actively disprove. It's much more direct.
Exact.
But I do worry, if we keep hammering these gotcha moments, does the piece risk feeling like a tabloid or, a partisan hit job? Because the tone right now is, it's intense.
And that brings us to the third point, and honestly, probably the most dangerous issue in the draft. The investigative work is solid, but the script bounces between serious journalism and a hyper-partisan commentary.
Yeah.
And that's going to alienate a huge part of the potential audience.
I definitely felt that. There are sections where the writer's anger just bleeds onto the page. You get phrases like demonic leftists, calls to kill them, attributing everything to a globalist agenda. It also seems to kind of downplay findings related to Trump because of a perceived bias in the FBI. It feels like the writer is screaming at me, not showing me evidence.
It's jarring, isn't it? It pulls you out of the evidence and puts you directly into the writer's personal politics.
Right.
And the second you do that, you lose anyone who doesn't already agree with you. You've turned an investigation into a rally.
But to play devil's advocate for a second, isn't there a real argument that the media has ignored the left-leaning figures in these files? Is pointing that out partisan, or is it just, correcting the record?
It's all about how you point it out. If you frame this as a partisan issue, half your audience just tunes out. The suggestion is to adopt a tone of, let's call it forensic outrage, instead of partisan outrage.
Forensic outrage. I like that. So the facts are what make you angry, not the team colors.
Precisely. It's the outrage of a prosecutor, not a pundit.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on leftists arrested, you focus on the specific, mechanical failure of the institutions, the FBI looking the other way, the mutually assured destruction nature of these friendships. That stuff is universally infuriating.
It doesn't matter who you vote for.
Exactly.
So then how do you handle the Trump allegations with that tone? Because right now, the script dismisses the 95 New Jersey claim as unfounded while it accepts the Gates stuff as gospel. It feels uneven.
You have to apply the same standard of evidence. It goes right back to our first point about the tier system. Acknowledge the unverified nature of the Trump allegation. That claim comes from an anonymous tip, 35 years after the fact.
Right.
You contrast that with the Gates allegation, which comes from an email draft written by Epstein himself. That is a forensic distinction, not a partisan one.
And that builds so much more trust. If the narrator admits that a tip against Trump is just a tip, I'm way more likely to believe them when they say an email against Gates is the real deal.
It shows intellectual honesty. It signals you're following the evidence, not a pre-written narrative. Now, this all leads to the final, and I think maybe the most insightful point.
Okay.
This script is hinting at a massive theme of financial extortion, but it keeps getting distracted by the salacious, almost tabloid details of the acts themselves.
I noticed that. There's a lot of time spent on Russian hookers, bridge tournaments, massages. It feels very focused on the sins, almost like a gossip column. But is there a risk that, by focusing only on the sex, we're missing the actual weapon?
That is the key insight. The sins are just the bait. The leverage is the trap. The suggestion here is to explicitly frame this whole thing not as a sex scandal, but as an intelligence and extortion operation.
I see.
The sex is the mechanism, but the goal is the money.
That makes so much sense. I mean, if you look at that Gates email again, we talked about the affair and the antibiotic, but the bulk of that message is about business. It's a buyout demand.
It is literally a bill. Look at the text. I suggest I buy you the house. In addition to 5 years of severance, 30 to 40% of a $100 million partnership.
Wow.
This isn't just don't tell my wife. This is pay me $40 million.
30 to 40% of a $100 million partnership. That's a massive number. And he's holding the affair over his head to get it.
He is. And the script has to use this to explain why these men, Lutnik, Musk, why they might be lying. It's not just embarrassment. It's because the services Epstein provided were transactional traps. They were designed for leverage.
That completely changes their motivation. And it also changes the perspective on that confidentiality agreement mentioned in the email. I kind of glossed over that the first time.
Yes, you have to zoom in on that line. Connect this to the confidentiality agreement in the Gates correspondence. Epstein writes, "You asked me to recommit to a confidentiality agreement."
So lawyers were involved. Paperwork.
It means this wasn't just a bad friendship. It was a business arrangement that went south.
And that is so much more damning than just he hung out with a bad guy. It implies Gates was paying for silence about an intelligence operation. It implies a contract.
Correct. And when you frame it that way, the listener understands the gravity of it. It moves from gossip to national security threat.
Or corporate espionage.
It elevates the entire script. It finally makes the silence of these powerful men make sense. They're not just embarrassed. They are compromised.
It really does. It ties everything back together. Even the credibility issues we talked about at the start. Separating the baby eating from the business deal.
Right.
This reinforces that. The business deals are the terrifying part because they're verified. The scimitars are a distraction. The $40 million extortion attempt is the smoking gun.
Exactly. So let's just recap the plan for the rewrite. We have 4 clear directives to take this from an internet rant to a definitive breakdown. First, you have to clearly separate primary documents, like that Gates email, from anonymous tips like the NTOC files. Don't let the sensationalism of one kill the validity of the other. Build a tier system. Second, use that denial versus proof structure for the high-profile figures. Don't just list their names. Show the public lie, then hit them with the private truth. Make the hypocrisy the star of the show. Third, just drop the demonic language. Adopt that tone of forensic outrage. If your evidence is strong, you don't need to scream. Trust the audience to get angry just from the fact. And finally, follow the money. Frame this as an extortion operation, not just a sex scandal. Show the contract, show the leverage, show the millions of dollars that were at stake. That is where the real...
We really see the potential here for this to be a definitive breakdown of these files, but it needs that discipline to get there. We'd love to see you refine the script with these points in mind and submit the work again for a final review. Good luck.